All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Andy Johnson. I'm one of the facilitators of the International Literacy Educators Coalition. And we've got a friendly group tonight, they say. And we need to hear the stories of real teachers who are impacted by the science of reading mandates. We haven't heard their voice enough. So tonight we're going to have people just tell their stories, and Michelle's going to be our storyteller telling her stories. But then we're going to open up the mics to either tell your story or to ask questions or to participate. And we don't know what's going to happen, and that's what makes it kind of exciting. Disclaimer up front. Michelle doesn't represent anybody, any school, doesn't represent ILEC. Neither do I. Well, I guess I kind of do. But these are her own views. I say that so she doesn't get in trouble. And sadly, people have to worry about their jobs simply for speaking out today. So, Michelle, with that, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us where you teach, and then let's hear how the science of reading is impacting you and your students.
Well, thank you for having me. My name is Michelle Ruhe. I am a literacy coach. This is my fifth year in the role in a very large and top district. It's growing in South Carolina, right actually outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. We're kind of a suburb of that. And we're expanding exponentially every year. How do I describe the district? It's a mix of affluent families and very, very, very low socioeconomic families. We actually have quite a large homeless population as well. So it's a wide variety. But we are very, very successful. We are actually, according to the latest test scores that we have, which was just last year, we're the very top performing district in the state. And we typically are in the top three for years. And we've been a balanced literacy district for a number of years. So that is where we've stood for a very long time. We're a very family-oriented district, but this legislation has forced us to immediately disband all the curriculum we've been using, all the practices that we've been using for years, and it's left us very, very confused. Not only because we are a top performing district and have been for so long, and suddenly we're being told to do different, but also because of the curriculum that we've been used to using and the practices that we've been used to refining all these years we've been forced to kind of like shy away from them. So it's led to a lot of just confusion, and we don't know what the outcome is going to be until our state test scores come out later this summer.
So tell us about what was before science of reading mandates and how that was working for you.
So because we're balanced literacy and strong balanced literacy, we already were doing foundational skills all the time in all of our classrooms, more so the primary classrooms. Phonics was very prevalent, and in recent years, probably the last 3 or 4 years, we've grown in our understanding of that foundational skill, and our schools have been more heavy in phonics for already several years. We are reading workshop, writing workshop, which means kids get explicit instruction. It's very explicit instruction in reading and in writing instruction. And they also enjoy reading and writing for a large period of time while the teacher confers and works with small groups to target individual and group needs. That's just been kind of par for the course for years. And now I think the biggest thing that we've noticed has been taken away from us and from kids is that choice in independent reading and writing.
So when people hear that term balanced literacy, how would you define that?
How would I define it?
Yes.
I would define it as a true mix of foundational skills and explicit teaching going on, but also room for choice and voice from kids. I would define it as whole group and small group. That's a balance with one-on-one conferring as well. It's fiction and nonfiction. It's just like a mix of, depending on where your students are at the moment and what your class needs, There's a balance of types of instruction going on, but it's always been, for me, it's always been foundational skill work embedded in that that workshop structure.
I notice in the conversation, sometimes we talk past each other because we have different definitions of things like balanced literacy. How would you define foundational skills then?
I would define it as phonological awareness development, phonemic awareness development, and all that phonics work. I would also include things like sentence structure and handwriting. That's always been a part of instruction. And again, depending on what your kids show the need for, there's a heavier or lighter mix of those things. So, but it's also choice and independent practice so that kids can really put into play what you've been teaching. So it's got to be like that time balance.
Before the mandates, what did you do for your struggling readers?
Lots of small group instruction. We really did a lot of reading with them and listening to them, which, is running records for sure. But the running records tell you a lot of information. The running records tell you a lot about fluency, reading behaviors, their application of phonics skills, or inability to apply phonics skills and high frequency word acquisition. Running records tell you a lot in a very short amount of time. So there was that. And I would say that some teachers have been using kind of like core phonics surveys and surveys like that for some time, but not many. I would say that this new focus on phonics has brought that to light, which has been great. That has been a good thing that has been brought in because it gives us more insight into kids' development as readers. I would say that writing has been kind of taken a back seat because of the time taken in core instruction now for reading. Whereas before we used to really examine student writing and gain insight into their patterns. Again, you can tell a lot about kids' phonological and phonemic awareness skills from their writing, in addition to just, writing in general. So I did that answer the question?
Yes, yeah. From your description, it sounds like your school district was doing everything right before the mandates. Everything from what I've read, research suggests is good literacy instruction. So tell us what's happening now. Tell us about both teacher autonomy and what's going on in the classrooms now.
So that has been, it looks different in different schools too, because everybody's interpretation is a little bit different, of course. And some schools have, more new teachers than others. So the need for more direction is prevalent in some schools. That said, I will say that teachers do feel like their autonomy has been taken from them in a great way because we have been told, follow this curriculum with as much fidelity as possible this first year so you can learn it and learn its ins and outs. But the problem with that is we've had to revamp a lot of the assessments included in that curriculum because they're low level and they're just not meeting our state standards. So we've had to do a lot of just digging and tweaking into the curriculum. And that's taken a tremendous amount of time and has taken away, some of the things that we've done before that we knew were great. We are having to replace with certain other things now. And also our district, but my school in particular, is a very, very heavy PLC school. We're actually a model PLC school in our state. We're the only
You'll have
elementary.
to define that, please.
PLC, so Professional Learning Community. We are affiliated sort of with a Solution Tree, who are kind of like the leaders in PLC work. And that just means we do a lot of data diving together as teams into the student work and student numbers and look at what we can do to improve our practice. And I think that's the biggest reason our district is so strong, is because of that practice. But because of the time planning and revamping this curriculum and rewriting the assessments because they're not that great, it's taken away that collaboration time for conversation and to really get into teaching practices. That's kind of taken a back seat, which is so unfortunate.
The conversation with teachers. Tell me more about that.
So we might, for example, look at some, our latest reading data that whatever it could be. Maybe it could be a standardized thing like maybe our STAR assessment, which is through Renaissance. It could be we were looking at fluency measures. It could be back in the, when we were allowed to, it could have been looking at leveled assessments, whatever it is. And we would look at, why, what's causing this data, what could be at play, what could we try next, what if, and we're leaning on each other. What's an idea that, your data looks great. What, your kids don't seem to be struggling with X, Y, or Z. Tell us how you've been doing that. And we really learn from each other that way. And that strengthens everybody's practice in huge ways. And so that has taken a backseat.
So we'll get to the students in just a minute, but what has been the impact on teachers?
I would have to say it's, and that's not measurable, but I would have to say it's their feeling of confusion, just lostness, and feeling like they don't know what exactly is right anymore, where they did feel super confident and they just had that self-efficacy feeling, and that's been really sort of eroded quite a bit.
So let's get into students. What's happening with your students now with the new reading program?
They haven't had nearly as much choice in reading for sure. There are actually, especially in the upper grade levels, when the curriculum takes much longer because of the text they're embedded in that are whole group instruction, their time for reading and independently has pretty much disappeared. And that's been the worst impact. That, of course, if it affects their vocabulary acquisition and their just enjoyment of reading and just progress in reading, that really impacts that. And they miss it. They especially our upper grade kids, they tell us that they really do miss that. So that's the biggest impact there. The other one is that they've really become test takers. This curriculum really is all about, it's a lot of assessment, and they do a lot of that. And so they're getting the message, unfortunately, which is not something they've had before, that reading is about assessing what you can do.
So the total amount of voluntary reading or the volume of reading, that has gone down.
Significantly.
Okay. Motivation to read.
In many classes, that has also decreased because they don't have the choice anymore, and because we're having to use what's in the curriculum, and there's no choice in that. It's you're reading this today. And no, there's a lot of ways we can scaffold that, of course, to make it both palatable and accessible. But at the end of the day, we take away that choice. And like the curriculum has a lot of trade books in it, which is wonderful, but many of them are excerpts of trade books. So they don't get a lot of experience anymore with whole entire books, which is a skill in itself that they really need exposure to. Now, some of the topics are very motivating and enjoyable for kids. So I would say it's about 50-50
Mhm.
every class. They really enjoy the topics or they really don't. So it's just a lot of choice taken away from them as well.
I could hear a state legislator talking now, as one has said to me, and they say, but it's working. What would you say to that? It's working.
I would ask how they know. There are not many curriculums out there. And I don't know that there are any curriculums out there that really have long-term research on their effects. And I would say research that is not funded by the company itself in some way.
Yes, which
We
is
need to look
different.
at that. So I would ask how they know that it's working.
And we really don't know until 3 years in if something's working. And that's an important point. Data collected by the company is not research.
Yes.
It's data, and people often don't make that distinction. In terms of research-based strategies, what are you seeing? What are and what aren't you seeing?
I would say that this has brought to light the importance of explicit work and fluency instruction, which is fantastic. I've been kind of preaching to the choir on that for a while at my school, and it's been more of a important focus. We had already been doing phonics instruction, explicit phonics instruction for a number of years. So the problem with that, though, is we were not allowed to use the program we were using anymore because it wasn't approved. So we had to relearn a new curriculum quickly and roll that out. And we are not seeing the benefits with this curriculum that we were seeing with the previous one. So we've had to make a lot of changes there. But kind of that's a wash because we were already doing phonics, we just doing different phonics. And the fluency I mentioned. I would say that there is not much in the curriculum in the way of actual comprehension strategy instruction.
Hmm?
Our teachers have had to lean on what they already knew and learning from things that I bring them as a coach. Writing is definitely missing. It's in the curriculum. It's in there, but it's very, very uh, cursory. It's very cursory and it doesn't really get them kids where they need to be. So that's missing. And I would say that's a very important part of the science of reading that is there, but our curriculum doesn't really support it.
And if you're not teaching the writing process, you're not teaching writing.
No, you're assigning it.
You're assigning and you're describing the end product. This is what it should look like. And you're not teaching the process.
Mhm.
And writing is one of the most misundertaught subjects in our school, that in comprehension, because people don't tell us about the good old days in writing workshop. What would we see in a writing workshop class? Look at the smile on your face.
Oh, because that's my favorite. That is my favorite thing to teach. You definitely see explicit instruction in a
Yes,
true writer's workshop. You see a lot of things. You see explicit instruction, you see exemplars being unpacked and shown, you see modeling happening all the time. And your explicit instruction along with that modeling is prevalent. You see targeted small group work that with flexible groups that change all the time. You see one-on-one conferring. That's the relationship building piece. And it's also that targeted differentiation piece. You see volume of writing because you are going through that writing process again and again and again. And you're seeing so much more joy from kids and from teachers because there's a genre maybe, but the kids get so much choice in that. It's not just writing about reading in a formulaic way. It's really showing the writing process and how to do it. And I've actually taken the training in a very popular writing program that's out there right now. There's so much overlap between workshop and that program actually. So it has a lot of good stuff in it. And all the people that say, well, it doesn't have phonics instruction. No, it doesn't. And it's very clear about that. It never did. That's a different part of your day.
yes.
And people will also say, well, it doesn't teach explicit sentence writing or paragraphing. I have to say, well, that's on the teacher. If you need to teach that, you need to teach that.
And
There's this,
that's best taught within the context of authentic writing instruction.
correct.
And teachers often, we go into a writing workshop, it's actually enjoyable to be there.
Mm-hmm.
When
It's
you're
usually the kid's favorite part of the day.
Yes. And when I would observe student teachers in classrooms, I wanted to stay there. It's enjoyable. The
Mm-hmm.
same with a reading workshop. It was an enjoyable place. And it seems complicated at first, but once you understand reading and writing workshop, they're more enjoyable. And I'm leading you here. I shouldn't be doing that, but it's actually easier to teach because it's a more authentic form of teaching.
Yeah. Can I address one thing about the reading workshop that I see
Yep.
a lot? I
Yep.
see a lot of people saying that when it's independent reading time, kids are just practicing bad habits or they're not being coached in any way. Again, I have to say that that's kind of on the teacher too. What kids are reading during that time needs to be things that they can read with confidence and
Yes.
competence. if the teacher isn't coaching the child in those materials that they're selecting or providing them some materials to read, that absolutely can be a problem. And if the teacher isn't monitoring this and checking in with the kids and doing some conferring, if that teacher is staying at that small group table and not watching what's going on, you're going to have things happen that aren't helpful for kids. So a lot of what I'm seeing in social media and in the news media about problems with workshop all come back to management and how that is all set up and an understanding of what those structures really require to be up and running smoothly.
And when it's done correctly, oftentimes it's a cartoonish version of reading workshop that's presented
Mm-hmm.
and saying it's a bad thing. But you have multi-level instruction that's meeting the needs of your high and low level writers and readers. And that's the joy. And
Yes.
absolutely what you say, there is specific instruction in a good reading workshop, in
Mm-hmm.
comprehension, in the skills in a good reading workshop.
Yeah.
All right. So you have seen some good things with the science of reading.
I
Uh,
have. I don't. We're a nation like we swing back and forth, and we throw the baby out with the bathwater every time. We
yep.
never seem to find balance right away until later. But I am glad that it brought about some conversation. If there were schools that were neglecting phonics,
Mhm.
that's awful. We absolutely need that. If there were schools that were neglecting fluency or phonemic awareness, yeah, that it's important that we have that conversation and bring it in because that matters a lot. But just like we did before, like we forget things that we need to keep and maintain. Lester Lemonak actually pretty recently wrote this beautiful article about how it's not really we need to stop thinking of it as like a pendulum swinging
Mhm.
and throw out this and go to this and now throw out this and go back to this. It's not that. He said if we did that, we'd be pretty dumb because we would not learn from our mistakes. It really is more of a Ferris wheel where we have all these buckets of instruction that we need to maintain. But when the focus is on, car 3, we tend to lose focus of car 9. And then we forget, and then we have to come back to it because it matters. So we're kind of like scooping up all these things, and it needs to be this cycle, not a pendulum. And I think that's what we need to have a conversation about is how do we make sure it's a balanced Ferris wheel and not a pendulum?
Okay. I'm going to open it up for questions in just a minute, so you can ask your questions to Michelle personally, and then we'll open it up for people that want to share their story. So, Michelle, anything else you want to say? Big picture, where is this going?
I think it's going to show in test scores because it has forever that it's really all this focus is not going to do what they thought it would do with it, the power, the Moms for Liberty groups and the politicians. It's not going to fix that. There's too many variables with our students in our country. And I think they'll realize that they went too far. And then they may even do some data gathering like England did on student motivation and see that that's gone down tremendously, and then they'll need to pick that back up. So I predict in about 8 years,
Yep.
we'll kind of be back to where we are now and having the same kind of conversations, but again, forgetting what we learned this time around. That's what I think.
And I liked what you said about the variables. They determined the variable that was the problem. Out of all the variables, they said, oh, it's this, you're not doing that enough. And then they determined the solution.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see if people have some questions, and you can just raise your hand in the question, and I'm going to open it up so you can actually ask the question yourself. And I know Mary Howard had a question. Deb Jacobson, do you have a reference for the British study on motivation?
Uh, Not offhand. I've seen it. Where did I see? I can't remember where I've seen it. I just because I do so much reading
Yes.
about this stuff, I just see it all the time. There is a book out of the UK called Balancing Act, and I do believe it's also referenced in there.
Yes, and I have it, I'm not a walking citation either, and I know exactly what book you're talking about, and I have it right behind me. Other questions that we have out there, and let's see if I see them in the chat. Okay. How was the decision to move to Science of Reading made? What roles did teacher have in the process?
Teachers had no role in that process. This was truly just a legislative mandate. It actually started with the Moms for Liberty group, really. They were pretty heavy in it. And just kind of went from there. But this came straight from the state less than a year ago and was put into place immediately. This is when, we were all told like we had to go through the letters training. Um, it was a very quick sweep and took place in the space of a year.
So Dominic Weiss is the name of the author of that
Yes, thank you.
from British. Tell me about letters. What was that like? Letters training.
I maybe I'm not the right person to ask because I'm 100 years old, so I went to college many, many years ago. This has all been very, very much review for me. I learned most of this in college. In fact, most of the research I've in the letters, but volume one anyway, is quite old. It's 60s, 70s, a lot of from the 90s. So like it's kind of just review for me. But I would say that my upper grade teachers, fourth and fifth grade especially, they are gaining a lot from it. They didn't learn this in their prep classes. I don't know if it's a regional thing, a generational thing. I have no idea. But those teachers in particular have found it very valuable. My primary teachers, not much because we've been doing this and they already kind of knew all this. The next year two, though, is more about vocabulary and comprehension. So everybody is looking forward to hopefully gaining some strategies and ideas from that volume. But this one I think it's important to have everybody on the same, page with things. But it was a lot for a year that for it's one of those questions, is the juice worth the squeeze? I don't know.
And that's an interesting one. When they say vocabulary instruction, what do they mean by that?
Just got into it, so I'm not sure. I just know that they're really talking about the importance of vocabulary and background knowledge, of course, in relation to comprehension of. So I think it's all about just building vocabulary. I don't know if it'll probably get into teaching vocabulary too. I know that Beck and McEwen are referenced quite a bit already, so that's solid research. So hopefully this year two will be a lot better.
Right. When they say explicit instructional vocabulary, most vocabulary is learned through wide reading and conversation. And there are some specific strategies that will help you develop your vocabulary. But to say this word means that and this word means that.
Right.
And I think that's what goes on in most people's head when they hear about explicit vocabulary instruction.
Yes, but I know they'll get into morphology, and
Yeah.
that is very important, and how that does open up networks for learning more words more quickly, especially when you're thinking about in the sciences, those kinds of words. So there is an explicit instruction aspect for sure, but absolutely you gain so much more from your own vocabulary that you use around your students, from your read alouds, and from the wide reading that you and they do. Absolutely.
And when they say explicit instruction and comprehension, what do they mean by that? Or what is meant by that?
I'm not sure about. I do know that the soundbite I hear a lot is that comprehension is an outcome, not a skill. So that I don't know what Letters is going to say about that quite, but we'll see.
Comprehension has to do with a cognitive process, and it's a thinking. You improve comprehension by improving thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You teach the cognitive process to develop the skill. And that's another workshop.
We will continue comprehension strategy work at my school. I promise you.
Excellent. And comprehension worksheets, are they successful in improving comprehension?
No.
I'm leading you. That's I shouldn't do that. What about fluency is a passion for you?
Mhm.
And I'm thinking the general public, when they think of explicit fluency instruction, and these are the words systematic and explicit, those are the buzzwords. What is fluency instruction?
So there's so many aspects to it. One of them is, scooping words into phrases that kind of sound natural and scooping words into phrases according to the punctuation and paying attention to the punctuation. I actually was just doing some oral reading fluency measures with first graders today, and that's like a timed thing. And it was so clear that so many of those kids were not appropriately using the punctuation. So that's part of it because it absolutely impacts meaning. It's also, the stress that you put on words because that certainly matters. We've all seen the "let's eat grandma" meme out there that matters a lot. And intonation, expression, all of those things go into fluency. Rate is part of fluency. However, it's not speed. It's appropriate rate for the type of text and for what the author intended. And that all needs to be modeled and taught and shown how for kids. So many kids come to us with, they think fast is good reading. I don't know if that comes from home or wherever, but we've got to break that habit. But also they can't be choppy either. And this phonics focus really has made some kids more choppy than they have been before. Now there's reasons for that, maybe that we could go into another conversation maybe, but that has to be taught how to scoop up words so that they sound like natural talking. So that's, and in terms of systematic, it really depends on the reader and depends on the task and it depends on the book. So what those things need, it's not like you teach scooping in 3-word phrases, in first grade and then scooping in 6-word phrases in second grade. It doesn't go like that. It depends on so many other factors.
Prosody is the term. That's when reading sounds like people talking
Mm-hmm.
versus word by word. All
Mm-hmm.
right, people, do you have stories that you want to share? What's happening in your district? How are students getting to work and think in groups with science of reading? How are students getting to work and think in groups with science of reading? Doesn't make sense. People, you can raise your hand. I will open your microphones. Don't be shy. I'm going to open your microphones. If you want to ask the question yourself, this is your chance. Michelle Roux to all panelists. Ingrid, no, but I think that's very similar to letters. Okay,
Can I address this question of Rick's?
please do. Yeah.
So it's a great question. He says, how are students getting to work and think in groups with science of reading? So I want to just say that science of reading it's really not a bad word. Neither is balanced literacy. There's a lot of practices and a lot of sciences that go into what makes science of reading. So I don't want to call it like a label. I want to say that. But with the way that things have now had to be structured according to the legislation, there's a difference between legislation version of science of reading and actual science of reading. So the way that we've had to restructure things now according to legislation and because of our curriculum means that that's where teachers are confused because the way that we group kids has been primarily focused on oral reading fluency patterns, things that we're seeing there, STAR data, phonics, especially phonics data. But the small group work that most of our teachers are doing that they design is really based on responses to reading that, maybe the teacher will do a read aloud and have kids do sort of like a stop and jot. And then we'll group the kids from there, which is a normal practice. It could also be based on all those assessments that we do in the curriculum. So the small groups have shifted that way. And they're just not choosing books from our book room all that often. Text that we used to see. It's more strategy based and skill based than whole text based. So I hope that answers your question. How are they getting to think with this structure? Not a whole lot. Like right now, we're not seeing as much as of that as we used to because of the focus on these foundational skills that the small group work entails. However, our teachers that are using authentic literature still and have learned to bring that in, they're still doing all that same work. It's just that the time allotted for that has really diminished.
Harriet asks, how do you teach decoding most effectively?
Well, that really depends on the kids, their age, what patterns they know, what patterns they need. It depends on their data. So,
There is no most effective way. There are different ways to teach decoding.
right. I would say though, just in general, I think that person is saying just like if you've got an unknown word and how do you teach kids how to go through it, it really you have to lean on the phonics that you've taught them and that you know that they know. It could also be syllabication work. It could be breaking off morphemes. There's a lot of different ways to go about it, but you do have to show them for sure. Um, and explain why. I think that's really important that you have to explain why and then give kids lots of practice doing that as well.
What about progress monitoring? Are you required to progress monitor?
Oh, absolutely. And we're doing that tremendously because we're a very data-driven school. So we have a lot of progress monitoring going on. We have full MTSS um, framework in place in the entire district. So what tools are we using? We often will, it fits this phonics data, for example, we will kind of create our own that mimic that so we don't overuse that same test, but we use just the subsets of the overall test that were most needed and we kind of track that. Um, and then we have STAR, our STAR assessment, of course. And then we kind of like organically make our own. I'm thinking, for example, one of our grade levels might give as an assessment a summative assessment that we create, and they might really want to focus on, let's say, author's purpose. So we really focus on what's the data showing on those questions, and then we might develop more work with that in small groups that we also can use for progress monitoring. So that really is a mix, but that honestly hasn't changed all that much because we were already doing that as a school.
When children need something more intensive than classroom teaching and small group instruction, is your state legislating what may or may not be used for a literacy intervention?
Yes, they didn't used to do that. So we do, like I said, we have the MTSS process fully in place. We have for many, many years. So there's tier one that everybody gets. Tier two is where the teacher might add more instruction to target certain needs with specific kids. And then we have tier three where there's a very specialized interventionist that works with them. And then beyond that, there's special ed. But yes, this year our legislation did dictate the types of progress monitoring tools that interventionists are allowed to use, as well as the curricular materials that they're allowed to use.
And how's that working?
We have very smart people in that position, so they're very creative with it. They've actually enjoyed the bigger focus on really targeted phonics work because that's typically the need that they see at that level. So they've enjoyed having more tools at their disposal for that. But they know how to use authentic text in beautiful ways, and they know how to double dip with the teacher in the classroom and use materials that are already being used in the classroom for targeted work and intervention. And they've enjoyed learning more. So for them, this has just become more tools in their tool belt that they appreciate having, but they are not ever going to throw away what they've done before. They're just melding them together.
Okay. Can you tell me about the RTI MTSS synthesis? How does that work for you moving from RTI to MTSS?
That was done years ago. I think, oh gosh, what was that, like 2010 or something, that language changed. So for us, that's been kind of a thing in our district for a very long time. And my school in particular, we're the school that actually has the greatest socioeconomic needs.
Mhm.
So we've always had to be very, very targeted in our watching kids and their progress. And that's been wonderful because we have everybody, involved. We've got our ESL teachers, we've got our classroom teachers, me, the lead teacher. We have a lead teacher's kind of over everything, administration, of course, the classroom teacher, special ed teachers will, like, everybody comes, and sometimes it might be the school psychologist, it could be the OT or behavior interventionist. Like, they all come because it's a whole child that we have to look at. So it's kind of just par for the course, though, because we've been doing this for so long.
About how many minutes a day do students read whole books in continuous chunks of time?
Like a blanket K5 number,
If you had to guess, I
I
know
would I would say that in K1 and maybe two, it would be maybe 15 minutes a day at now. Upper grades,
10 and 15.
in those grades, yeah. My third grade probably is a good 20 minutes maybe. And then beyond that, there's really not much happening because that curriculum just takes up all the time.
What are your thoughts on teaching literacy with consistency between classrooms, consistency between grade levels?
This brings to mind the F word, the fidelity word. I don't know if that's what you're going for, but I think we all need to be on the same page with where we're going standards wise. What are we assessing? I always push, and we always do, backwards plan. We know where we're going. And we in general have we do create our general scope and sequence of our lessons together, but everybody knows, and I'm very big on autonomy. You do you. If your kids need a certain thing, you do it, as long as you get your kids to where they need to be standards wise, because that's how we're assessing.
Mm-hmm.
That's totally cool. I don't care if you want to swap out books. I don't, and I actually encourage that. I spend a lot of extra money on books because teachers are always wanting to swap them out. And if you've got a new spin on things, do it. Even though I am part of all the lesson planning for the entire school, when I go model a lesson, I never do what's on the plans. I know what in general to do, but
Mm-hmm.
I sure don't follow it exactly. And I want everyone to do that because that's how you learn and
Mm-hmm.
grow as an educator. So everyone's on this rowing in the same direction, but
Yep.
they're not in the same boat. You can't. Your kids are all different, and so are your teachers.
Yep. With explicit and systematic instruction, which takes a large amount of whole class teaching, do your teachers find time for tier two instruction?
Yes and no. We have a built-in, a lot of people call it win time, like what I need. A lot of people call it that. We all have that in our district. It's a 30-minute time. However, whenever you give extra time, you're stealing it from something else. So I always feel like we just should have kept it where it was so that we had more time in literacy to just work with more small groups. So that's always been very, very, very hard to do. And the one thing that I'm doing that's very different than most is I've really encouraged and helped my teachers move to a framework where we're combining reading and writing into just one lesson whenever possible. Like 90% of the time, it's very possible. And most of, like, second grade through fifth grade, most of my teams are able to do that for the most part. Now, right now, we're in testing season. That's not happening. But to make room for in the instructional day for small group work and to try to protect a little bit of independent reading time and writing time, that combination model has been very, very, very effective.
We've got an interesting comment from Australia.
Oh,
More of a comment, really. I'm here in North Queensland, Australia. I love all that you have said, and I'm thankful that these conversations are being had. Again, I think that point is important. I'm semi-retired now and only doing 1 day a week and some relief work. As a past reading recovery teacher, I find there's so much joy lost with decodable text and excessive phonics teaching. So I say, bring back the joy of reading and writing.
mm. Trying to keep it as much as I can. I'm trying to do what I need to do, for kids. And there is a need for explicit instruction, 100%, a huge need, but there's also a need for the joy. And so I'm trying to keep that balance as much as I possibly can. That's my number one mission in my school.
Other questions? How has the mandated legislative curriculum affected the ways in which teachers rely upon state standards? Is there consistency between the two?
So actually, this has forced teachers to have to dig deeper into the standards. And again, that's part of our PLC work together is really unpacking what those are because we know that, and this has been something that leadership, including me, has really had to make sure that we send the message about that all these curriculum companies, they're just out to make a dollar, a lot of dollars.
Yeah.
So they are writing it for the masses. Nobody's writing it for your specific state. So that means we have to go in, and even though it says, oh, we're hitting these state, South Carolina standards, are they really? We have to dig into the lessons deeply and look at, are they really hitting it or not? So it's actually made our teachers hold more tightly and understand more deeply the standards, and that has been our guiding light so that we know what to tweak.
Tell me about the teachers coming into your district. Are you finding enough teachers? Are they prepared? What is your perspective?
So far, we've been very lucky. Again, because we're such a top performing district, everyone kind of wants to be here. And we're outside of a large urban district that not a lot of people want to be in. So, so we tend to attract a lot of people. So we haven't seen the shortage that so many other districts have had the unfortunate experience going through. And I would say, and they come from all over. They come from, the Midwest. They come from California. They come from, the Carolinas. They come from everywhere. So there's a mix. But I would say for the most part, our teachers are quite well prepared. They dive right in, they take it all on. It's a high pressure school to be in because of the needs of our kids, but you're going to have teachers who a little stronger training than others here and there. But for the most part, we've been just blessed as a district with who we get.
Other districts are experiencing shortages. Why do you think that is?
It could be the pay. It could be that's part of it. It could be the requirements. I'm not sure. I don't know. And if you're not going to, as a district, if you are not marketing yourself to be competitive financially, you're not going to get a lot of people. And if your scores are low, a lot of people will shy away from that kind of situation for sure. And also, there's a lot of word of mouth and a lot of, you hear and you see how much support teachers are getting and how do they, is it a strong work, ethic environment, and do they feel appreciated? If the, trend is that they don't, no one's going to go there.
You mentioned it's testing season. How much time is taken preparing for tests and then taking tests?
Oh, more than I would like. I try so hard but teachers feel so much pressure to perform. So the thing is, if you prepare all year long, if you know how those tests are structured, the sorts of questions and how they are set up, and the vocabulary, if you know that, and that's my role as a coach, it's my role to dig deeply into that and share that with teachers, then you can make sure that all year long you are sprinkling that in and mirroring that. And there's there's no surprises later. So I totally believe in just year-long little test prep. Um, and I dive deep into the testing data every summer, very deeply into that as much as I can, so I can see where our weaknesses might be, and then we layer that in the next time around. So I think the test prep that goes on for the most part is 2 weeks before. People will spend 5-10 minutes a day, maybe targeting specific grammar kinds of questions, vocabulary kinds of questions. That's about it because we've been doing it all year long. There's no sense in stopping instruction to teach the test.
How do the tests impact students?
Well, we have one of those third grade retention laws. So those kids will have, if they don't pass, they have to attend a summer reading camp like many other states have in place. Normally, like there's been very few instances where they haven't been cleared after that summer reading camp to go on to fourth grade. So really it's just the pressure. It's not really uh, an outcome that they suffer from. It's just the pressure leading up to it. That's where they suffer because that's such a heavy burden on them and their parents, they get this letter at the beginning of the year that, hey, in third grade, be aware, this is what the law says. And if your kid doesn't pass, they might be retained. And then they get another letter based on their very first, like September, October scores. Hey, this is a low score. Heads up, your child might be retained. And that's a very, very scary thing for any parent to hear.
And think about the kid. My God.
Exactly, exactly. So that we try so as hard as we can to just say, this is just, paperwork that we have to give you. We're supporting your child in every way we can. We're partnering together on this. And for the most part, our parents are really great about it. But that is where it's been the most negative impact.
How many kids get these letters?
Depends on the school. Roughly, well, and so
10%, if you had to guess, 20?
no, and not that many. I would say normally 8 to 10.
Okay.
This year, though, our state did change the cut scores, so that very much increased the numbers. So like 15 went out this year
Oh
per
my,
school.
15 letters per school?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Do you have a sense of the percentage that would be?
I would say, I mean, low
1 or
2%.
2% at
Yeah, yeah.
most. Okay. Well, it's still tough on that kid.
So hard. Yes.
Talk about pressure. If I don't pass this, I'm either flunk or have to go to summer school.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
I know. That's the worst part of it, but and we're kind of so many states are stuck with that kind of initiative.
Yeah. We're teaching kids how to be failures. Just imagine what that does to a kid. See,
Yeah.
I'm old enough. I can picture students in my head, friends of mine who would fail that test.
And that's one of the reasons I really, really ask my teachers to please not test prep so much because I don't want to send this message to kids that one day, that 1 2 hour, 3 hour blip
Yep.
mattered so much. Like they're still going to go to college. It's fine. They're going to be fine. But that's another reason I don't like the test prep.
Okay. Do we have any other questions, people, or people that want to join in? You offer more hope than I felt in a while. Uh, Thank you so much for the work you're doing. Inspiring. Well, that's nice to hear. Yeah. What happens to teachers who want to use their own curriculum? Are they fired?
No, they're not fired. They're going to get their hands slapped, probably. It also very much depends on the leadership that's in that school and the stringent rules and accountability that they have in place. It depends from school to school, but I I, they're going to get their hands slapped. But what are you going to do?
Yep.
As long as they're meeting the students' needs and they're meeting the standards, then yeah, I don't know. Not my circus or my monkey, so I don't know.
Okay. Final call for questions or comments. This has been so good to actually get beyond the numbers and hear from a person what's going on in their school, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's some of each. Yes, thank you. People are giving you hearts and flowers.
Oh,
That sort of
I'm
thing.
glad. I hope it was helpful.
It was incredibly helpful. Incredibly helpful. And it's not as black and white as we like to think.
No, never.
All right, lots of hearts. Okay, we'll have another teacher panel in May, and I appreciate, Michelle, your willingness to come on here so much. And thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, people, that has been it. We will see you at the next one. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.